First of all, we have a new attorney, Mr. Wayne Bloom, who's taking the place of a longtime attorney, Victor Peepers. So we welcome him to the board. And there will be a slight change in a few minutes, which I shall explain. And then we have 3 decisions. If by chance you are here for Christopher and Jean Lynch, we will not have a decision on that application tonight. We will have a decision on that next month. So I know there are some people here for that, so rather than have you waste your time, unless you want to hang around for everything else, now, fine.
That's a 58 Rossford, right?
Yes. There's no decision on that tonight.
Thank you.
On the application of case number 2963, Mildred Butler and trustees, 29 Ann's Lane.
I move we accept this decision as proposed.
Do we have a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you, Wayne.
On the application of case number 2967, David Bonnet Living Trust, 484 First Neck Lane.
I move we accept this decision as proposed.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
On the application of case number 2968, Southampton RE Partners, 95 Down East Lane.
I move we accept this decision as proposed.
I'll jump the gun there.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Now, we're going to have a slight change in the order of applications on the pending cases. We're going to move from number 472 First Neck Lane up to the top because Mr. Bloom has to recuse himself from that, having had past contract with this house or owner years and years ago, but he doesn't want to leave any doubt. So Mr. Robinson will take the place for just that one case. So, on the application of 2973, 472 First Neck Lane LLC, 472 First Neck Lane, for the applicant.
For the applicant, John Bennett, Bennett and Reed, 212 Windmill Lane, Southampton, New York. With me is my associate, Bailey Larkin, and Tim Rump from Aries Design. Always a pleasure to work with Tim, as well as Melissa Dedovich from Peconic Environmental. And Lisa Zaloga, the project architect. Just a bit of a prefatory statement before I go into explaining the submissions that were made prior to the work session. This is an unusual or precedent-setting application only to the uninitiated, only to those who are totally unaware of how this board has handled wetlands applications for the last 27 years. This is, quite frankly, based not only on my experience, but based upon the long line of cases that this board has handled since the 27 years it has been administering quite responsibly the village wetlands law. It is a case that is not problematic whatsoever. It has been mightily tried by some of the objections to appear so, but it's anything but that. It's been said that this is the only case where you're asked to, you're dealing with a house that's totally within the wetlands regulated area, i.e. 150 feet from the wetlands. That's simply not the case. It's demonstrably not the case. Just to take a slight grab, you can go on the north side of Meadow Lane from Road D, Beard, Ben Greenfield, now the guy owns Emilino. Katzoff, Hickey, Greenwald, and you can see many times this board has granted expansions well more than 525 square feet in the regulated area, and that's what we're here for this evening. Many times more than 525 square feet. You wisely and responsibly and respectfully and reasonably look at the entire application, the mitigation that's offered, and I am quite confident, gentlemen, that if you follow what you've been doing wisely for the next 27 years, you'll handily, and I don't say this in any way that should be construed to be flip or anything else. I'm quite confident that if you handle this application the way that you've handled applications in the past 27 years, we'll grant the application. When we were here last month, we had presented our application for the Natural Resources Special Permit, and then there were questions asked. We had a very extensive presentation that was full of significant mitigation, the type of mitigation that this board asked for. We even had some novel mitigation, some mitigation that I don't believe that you've seen in an application yet. I'm speaking specifically of the innovative alternative septic system, and it would be, certainly would be the first innovative alternate septic system on Lake Agawam. But there were some questions asked by the board and by the applicant, excuse me, and by Mr. Voorhees, and we committed to get the response to all those questions to the board prior to the work session. We did so, and we also gave copies of that to Mr. Fife, who had asked that we do so. We got it to him either the day of, I think it was the day after the filing, but certainly over 10 days ago. So what have we submitted since the work session, and hopefully you gentlemen have had the opportunity to look at it all. We have a site plan and the 200-foot radius map, which was revised to show we're maintaining the existing well elevation of the existing residence and renovating it within the height limitations of the village code. So that's very important because there is no longer any request for a variance in this matter. The opponents argue that there is, ignoring numerous previous pronouncements of this board that an application for a wetlands permit is not a variance application. I think that's beyond any sort of argument, but in any event, this board has tackled that issue in the past. I think the clear language of the statute allows for no other conclusion than what this board has come to, which is you don't look at variance standards when all you're dealing with is a wetlands application, and that's what this is, a wetlands application solely. There was a request for a 4-foot height variance because there were going to be some modifications to the western facade of the house, which would have required a height variance. That's been withdrawn. And I would respectfully request, therefore, that as the chairman stated at the beginning of the last meeting, we're not here to talk about architecture. We're here to talk about the wetlands standards in the code and how this application handily meets those. So we have withdrawn that application for a height variance. Also, at the request of Mr. Voorhees, the site plan and 200-foot radius map has been revised to note the existing driveway coverage within the 125-foot wetland setback has been reduced. The request was to show the comparison within 125 feet and 150 feet of the wetlands regulated area, excuse me. So the applicant proposes to reduce driveway coverages within the 125-foot regulated area by 1,197 square feet and reduce driveway coverage within the 150 wetland setback by 1,367 square feet. Now, those are obviously, you don't total those numbers and get the reduction. It's just CHIC all usually asks for what the reduction is in the 125 and what the reduction is in the 150. So those are that's what we've provided. Floor plans and elevations prepared by Lisa Zaloga, last revised on July 18, were submitted. And they were revised to reflect the applicant's desire to maintain the existing western portion of the residence and renovate it. Some slight fenestration changes, but nothing involving this board's jurisdiction, nothing. Plans were prepared by Areas Design, revised, and again, those were submitted by the work session, and they merely were revised to reflect that the applicant will maintain the existing footprint on the west side of the home. Again, that all growing out of the request, or actually the withdrawal of the request for a height variance. As requested by Mr. Voorhees, the revised plan prepared by Mr. Rumpf, and Mr. Rumpf is here this evening to answer any questions. He might have a thing or two to say about some viewshed issues. But as Mr. Voorhees requested, staging for construction vehicles and materials were incorporated into the demolition and mobilization plan. That's DM1 and the construction phasing plan. We also submitted a revised coverage chart prepared by Melissa at Peconic Environmentals that shows the revised driveway. It notes the proposed drainage for 2 inches of rainfall, drainage structures to contain the stormwater runoff. There are none now. So there are now structures to contain the runoff. So we would submit that all information requested by the board and Mr. Voorhees has been supplied. We're submitting no new evidence this evening. I have a letter which responds to Mr. Fife's legal arguments. He doesn't submit any new evidence. There may be some tonight from Mr. Fife, I don't know. But he made legal arguments which are primarily a rehash of prior legal arguments. I responded to those. I'll submit that letter. Their response to his legal arguments. I am presenting no new evidence this evening, so at the end of this, barring something quite unusual, at the end of this hearing, I'm going to ask you to close this hearing for decision. And I think, and I will say, based upon my experience, that but for what I can only describe as a manufactured controversy having nothing to do with your board's jurisdiction and the manner in which you handle wetlands cases, that this hearing probably would have been closed on the first hearing. It's a 525, forgive me if I'm off a few square feet, addition in well behind the existing established wetlands location, the location of the existing house relative to wetlands on the property. So again, the coverage chart also shows the revised driveway and the proposed drainage for the 2 inches of rainfall. The bedroom count has been repeatedly questioned. I knew we were going from 8 bedrooms to 9. I knew it based upon my knowledge of not only the Suffolk County Department of Health Services code, I knew it based upon my knowledge of the village code. When we met with the building inspector, he confirmed it verbally when we first filed the plans, but we did also get a copy of, we do have a letter which was submitted prior to the July 18th work session in which Mr. Foster reviews the submissions, confirms the accuracy of the bedroom count, and specifically states that Mr. Fife's calculation of the bedroom count is incorrect. A brief summary of the application is mitigation. An entirely new wastewater system, a new innovative alternative system that works to reduce nitrogen loading, and you don't have to take that from the engineer. Pio Lombardo, who did the study for the Peconic Baykeeper for Lake Agawam, comes to the conclusion that even with this addition, the nitrogen from this parcel placed into Agawam will be reduced by 50%. I'm not aware of any other time that you asked an applicant to demonstrate that for the numerous applications that you have handled along Lake Agawam, but we are demonstrating that. I will also suggest that since this innovative system actually reduces the nitrogen, and all the other systems that you approved didn't have any of this nitrogen reducing treatment that goes on in this new alternate system, it'll be the only time that you've been able to have an applicant who willingly came forward and actually reduces the nitrogen going into Lake Agawam. And that's very significant. The systems haven't been available before. They haven't been approvable by the health department. And as I demonstrated at the first hearing, the health department is satisfied in full with this system and is ready to approve it. Just their protocol is they don't give the final approval until there is a wetlands approval by the municipality and/or the state, if applicable. And of course, you guys, pursuant to an agreement with then Commissioner Jorling, the DEC, have in effect the New York State freshwater wetlands jurisdiction, which, by the way, would be a 100-foot setback. We specifically, it took a lot of pushing, yelling, screaming, and cajoling from me. I said, get that system, as beneficial as it is, out of the 200-foot regulated area. So it's all out of the 200-foot regulated area, and it's replacing two systems in which no treatment takes place, not even the basic sort of very primitive treatment that you'll have in a wastewater system where there's a holding tank, where some of the solids are taken out. These are simply antiquated wastewater systems. One is 140 feet from the wetlands, the other is about 195, that simply leach into the groundwater. And they're fine from a legal point of view, they're grandfathering, but those are being removed and replaced with a system that's not only outside of the regulated area, but as far as I know, is the only wastewater system that's been proposed on Lake Agawam that will actually reduce the amount of nitrogen going into the system, into Lake Agawam. So that is a clear and convincing evidence of compliance with the code. Mr. Fife, in his letter that I received yesterday, keeps on talking about how we haven't showed or demonstrated through clear and convincing evidence that we've complied with the purposes for the wetlands law. Well, the purpose of the wetlands law is to limit from development the impact on wetland systems from new development. And since we're putting in this new system, I would say that's clear and convincing evidence of compliance with the code and reducing the nitrogen. That's undisputed. As a matter of fact, Mr. Grover, the objectance expert, unequivocally said, and he's an honest person, because what else he said? What else could he say? The innovative system as well as the 40-foot buffer are good things. I don't know what else he could have said. He was honest and agreed with us that they were. There will be a new buffer, a native species buffer, 40 feet from the existing wetlands line. There is none now. That is not disputed. The proposed buffer will not only significantly positively impact nitrogen discharge, it will also will increase the wildlife habitat. That's what those things do. And there's none now. So that's, again, clear and convincing evidence of compliance with the code. No wetlands buffer exists, as indicated on the chart that was submitted on July 18th, and also as was indicated and demonstrated at the very first hearing. This proposed buffer will create 13,083 square feet of native vegetation along Lake Agawam. That's substantial, all in exchange for a 525 square foot addition within the regulated area. Everything else on this proposal is outside of the regulated area, conforms to zoning. We're not here for any zoning relief whatsoever. So we're establishing a 13,083 square foot wetlands buffer where none exists. That's clear and convincing evidence of compliance with the code. And think about this, 592 square feet of habitable space, well beyond the existing southerly and easterly side of the house that's the closest to the wetlands. This is a substantial, probably as much mitigation as you have ever seen for such a small increase in habitable space. There's no other place to do it, by the way. You have to connect so that we can, in effect, get to an area for the additions that will be outside of the regulated area. You have to have some sort of connection. And it's very small. You know, I keep on reading in the opposition papers, massive, substantial, massive. This is anything but massive. Even the addition as a whole, and remember, except for the 592 square feet of habitable space where we come to you and ask you to give us approval along the lines of the approvals you've been doing for 27 years. The addition as a whole is well under what one could put here under zoning. 6,000 square feet less. 6,000 square feet less than what is allowable under zoning. So the proposed additions are well beyond the existing established wetlands area of the home. So the applicant's efforts in citing the addition on the subject property is clear and convincing evidence of compliance with the code. You couldn't just put an addition directly to the north. It had to get moved back, because otherwise we'd be here asking you for a much larger addition that would need some help for wetlands approval. We've tried to keep it as reasonable as possible. Since this application was before the board last month, the applicant and his representatives have met with several of the neighbors. Although it's already part of the board's record, I'd like to mention that the Scarboroughs originally opposed the application. Their letter was made part of the record last meeting. They have significantly modified their position, indeed commending the applicants of 472 First Neck Lane, and I think those letters speak for themselves. Mr. Frist, who's a neighbor on the driveway, and by the way, the driveway that services this property is owned by the applicant, the owner of 472. But a few people get access over that via easement. Mr. Frist is one of them, and he has submitted a letter withdrawing his previous opposition to the matter. I don't think there's any need to read it. It speaks for itself, and I'm trying to be brief. Mr. Bonet, the neighbor to the south, 2 lots to the south, I believe, I spoke with his attorney, Gilbert Flanagan, today, who authorized me to state that his client is neutral on the application, which means he doesn't oppose it. So I thought to myself, regardless of what people have said, when I came to this application, I recognized it, particularly with the mitigation that was being offered, as a great application. So I said to myself, in thinking about this, if I was going to oppose this application, I was going to step out of my shoes and look in and see how could I oppose it, it would be difficult. So what would I do? Well, first of all, I'd delay by trying to get this board to refer the application to the ARB, despite the fact that there's no authority for it, despite the fact that sometimes boards refer to other boards when that other board that you refer to has some sort of expertise on the subject matter before you. We're not talking about architecture here. As the chairman accurately pointed out, the Architectural Review Board and Board of Historic Review has absolutely no expertise on wetlands, and that's what you're dealing with here. There's no code provisions for it. Mr. Fife cites a code provision which I'm shocked he cited, because a mere reading of the statute, certainly by a lawyer and I think by a layperson, says that that's applicable when there's a variance request been made, and this board has decided in prior applications, when you're dealing only with a wetland situation, the variance standards are not applicable. But the statute, that statute in the village code talks about a use variance. We're not here for a variance, and we're certainly not here for a use variance. What is the purpose of that section? That section is when you have a historic house that someone has obtained the permission to demolish. You can then go to the Zoning Board of Appeals and say, this house doesn't work as a house. Can you give me some use relief to make it work as something else? And if you do that, I'll preserve it. And what's the example? The example is the Foster House. It's Boyd Ralph's bed and breakfast. That's when that section was used. That was a house. There was permission given by the village to tear it down. the village sat with the owner and said, if we give you some use relief, would you consider preserving that historic structure? And the answer is yes, but I want to turn it into what amounts to a hotel and expand it greatly. That's what that section is about. And in that case, they say, you know, you're dealing with dimensional stuff, you're dealing with uses, you can refer it to the ARB. Statute in the village code is totally inapplicable. A layperson can see that, certainly a lawyer can see it. So what I try to do is refer it to the ARB if I was opposing this application, to try to delay things and put it into a briar patch. I'm confident you're not going to allow the applicant, the objectants, to create that sort of gambit.
Would you be opposed to this being referred to the ARB?
Absolutely. It would be inappropriate, without authority, would make no sense whatsoever. You are here, Mr. Geider, as you said the last time when you opened up the meeting, we're here to talk about, not here to talk about architecture. We're here to talk about a 592 square foot addition to this house that doesn't comply with that. I'm sorry, that is within the regulated area. So I think a referral. I think a referral to the ARB is unwarranted, is without authority, and it literally makes no sense.
Well, at some point, you are going to have to go there.
Of course, and I'll make my case there. But what are they going to say to you about your exercise of wetlands jurisdiction? Nothing. Nothing. That's just a gambit to delay things. Then I would attack the applicant personally. If I was going to oppose this, I'd attack the applicant personally with relevant facts, including prompting a New York Post article, amongst others, and a Channel 12 article, talking about nothing but personality and personal facts, facts that have nothing to do with this board's exercise of jurisdiction under the wetlands law. Now we get a petition signed by people with no standing. No standing whatsoever. Somebody said to me, 380 people signed a petition. I looked at them and I said, quite frankly, so what? I'm confident that this board will administer the law as a board that has administered this law for 27 years and not engage as judges in a popularity contest. That I'm confident of. Then I would argue points of law that are already settled. I would say you have to apply this variance standard, but in the Greenwald case and other cases, this board said you don't apply the variance standards in a wetlands situation. I would argue, as I said before, I would talk about a section in the village code requiring allegedly referral to the Architectural Review Board, and when the code section says nothing of the sort, because there's no variance application being made here, and because there's no use variance application being made here, and because that board has no expertise to help or guide you on the things that you're charged with deciding. Then I would talk about the existing condition of Lake Agawam, and I would try to get you to ignore the fact that this project will improve it, and ignore the fact that we are reducing the nitrogen level by 50%, and that's been unassailed. I would try to get people to be concerned about the condition of Lake Agawam, as if that has anything to do with this application, the way the mitigation has been expertly crafted to make sure that it actually benefits Lake Agawam. This application will benefit Lake Agawam. It will not detract from it. It'll reduce the nitrogen loading, and it'll provide a buffer where there is none. And I'm not going to put this in the record. I'll show it to people. because I'm going to show you something that you folks, as people who live in this community year-round, know about. But I started thinking to myself, what's the cause of the problem with Lake Agawam? When I was a kid, I used to fish in Lake Agawam. We caught carp and perch because that's what lived there. And that was about it. And why? And then I thought about the many times on a February where the ground is frozen and there's a heavy rain. I walk out of the front door of my office, and this is what I see across the street on Windmill Lane. You know what that is? That's a massive stormwater drain. A massive stormwater drain. And I thought to myself, maybe people who don't live here, maybe people who don't live with this stuff, maybe people don't see this stuff, maybe people just aren't unaware of it, maybe people who weren't 10 years old and saw guys when they were fishing in Lake Agawam crawling into storm drains, thinking to myself, these guys are crazy. 2/5 of the runoff from the stormwater runoff from the village of Southampton goes into that lake. You could take every house that's on the shores of Lake Agawam away, and it would still be a problematic body of water, because 2/5 of the runoff go into that lake. Petroleum, cadmium, antifreeze, dog feces, et cetera, et cetera. Now, the village has made some strides. If I look a little bit off, when I'm coming out of the front of my office and I look a little bit to the northeast, I can see an area in Bowdoin Square where they've put in a lot of stormwater retainage. And I will tell you, just anecdotally, that has helped. But there's a long way to go. So that's primarily what causes the issue. And I'm not here to attack the village. These systems were set up before anyone thought to themselves, you shouldn't use a freshwater body to, in effect, create a recharge basin, which is what this is. It's a recharge basin. But this application, when people say save the lake, save the children, this application is a tiny step towards doing it, but it's a positive step. It's not a negative step. We're adding buffer. We're limiting stormwater runoff. We're holding stormwater runoff on our property. We're reducing nitrogen. So as opposed to being critical, people should be extremely supportive of this application. People, if they knew what they were talking about, would be supportive of this application, because it does what your wetlands law tells you to do, and it does what you've told people to do over the last 27 years. If you want to enlarge the size of the house, even houses that are going to be 100% within the regulated area, such as the houses on Meadow Lane, some of the houses on Lake Agawam up on Linden Lane, and some other ones that we've taken care of. If you want to do that, you've got to come and horse trade with us. You've got to give us some buffers. You've got to improve the septic. You've got to retain the stormwater. This is what we've done. And there are cases where you've required less mitigation for much larger additions. So this is hardly out of sync with what you've done in the past. What else would I do if I wanted to oppose this application? I'd put a record in the size of the Manhattan phone book. That's what you got the first meeting. But if you read it, it has about as much relevance as the Manhattan phone book. It talks about the history of the to this application. It talks about the history of the property, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Nothing about wetlands. Nothing whatsoever. My client bought this house because he likes the house. He bought the house because he likes an old historic house. He wants to preserve it, yet he's being criticized. He's been the subject of character assassination, all of which have nothing to do with this application. And I ask you to just ignore it. We have received from the village a copy of the correspondences of Mr. Fife and Ms. Van John. This is our response. It's pure legal argument. I am not submitting any new evidence. You asked us to make sure that if we had any new evidence, we got it to you before the work session. We did that. And we worked very hard to do that because I knew I was going to come in here this evening and very respectfully ask you to close this hearing and make a decision. Mr. Fife and Ms. Van John's, oh yes, certainly. Letters.
Want to go.
Yeah. I'm sorry, I didn't hand out, I apologize. They submit no new evidence, they clearly make arguments. Make legal arguments. And these are things that you can deliberate on after the close of the meeting. We have specifically submitted no new evidence because we don't want anyone to claim that there is any new evidence that they should be given an opportunity to respond to. We have tried assiduously to make our applications, to get our applications to you as quickly as possible, to get our changes as requested by the board and by Mr. Voorhees to you as quickly as possible. So all the materials that are presently before the board have been on file since prior to the work session. And as evidenced by their submissions, the opposition has had opportunity to review all these submitted materials. And of course, unless the board or Mr. Voorhees requests the additional pertinent information this evening, we would ask that you accept this as the final submission. There's got to be an end to it at some time. And again, there's no new facts coming in here. We're just responding to Mr. Fife's legal arguments, which are primarily a repeat of his prior arguments, and ask that you accept this as our final submission and close the public hearing at this time. I simply, people ask me what's that board like to appear before, and I say to them, they're not a pushover. They ask a lot of questions. They're not easy, but one thing they are is consistent. So all I would ask you to do is be consistent. And if you do that, I'm confident that you'll approve the application. Is there anything else we need to add, Brian? Ken, did you want to comment on anything? No. Nope. Okay. Well, of course, if there's something that we feel we'd have to rebut, we hope we won't have to. But other than that request, I think we're
Is there any thought been given to moving the house out of the wetlands?
that would be problematic because you would be, if you asked Mr. Studenroth, no, there hasn't been. No, that would not be. We would have to lift up the house, and that's never been requested.
That's done all the time. It's not novel to lift up a house and move it and put a new foundation in it.
I already have objections. I already have objections based upon the fact that they think that the proposed improvements are too close to them. So that's just going to become a ping pong. That's all there is.
Well, if they're too close, but they meet the setbacks.
That's absolutely correct. The house, some of the additions.
Out of the wetlands.
Some of the additions.
You don't need us anymore. Huh?
Some of the additions.
You
Some of the
go straight to
additions.
ARB.
No, but then the ARB will say. Then the ARB will say, as they did with the Cooper Kendrick house, and as is very common in the literature. Not only is the house, but the site of the house is important, number one. And number two, I have never seen this board, except in the cases where the house is literally on the wetlands, such as Meadow Lane, I have never seen this board ask an applicant where the house is, how many feet are we from the wetlands, the closest? The house itself is about 90 feet. I've never seen this board ask the applicant to move a 5,000 square foot house that's 90 feet from the wetlands, further back from the wetlands.
I don't think we're asking it. We're saying, has any thought been given to it?
No, because what it does is it creates other problems. It creates problems of moving a historic house. It creates problems of putting it up in the air. It creates problems of issues.
That's done all the time. They're doing one down on.
We don't think. I know. I understand.
They're to South Main Street. They've been working on it for months.
Yeah, Chairman, I don't think, given this board's method of of approach on other applications. You've got applications up and down Lake Agawam where you've never asked anyone to move a house that's 90 feet from the wetlands, let alone asked anyone to move a house that's 50 and 60 and 40 feet from the
As
wetlands.
you know, we treat every case as being unique
I understand.
itself.
I understand. That would
No
also,
two cases that are exactly
that
alike.
would also push this house further away from the public view shed, and one of the things that's claimed by the objectants is you have to keep this house in the public view shed.
That means the neighbors can look at it.
Well, the neighbors, yeah, so that the neighbors
What's the rest of the view
and the driver and the people driving by on Meadow and Gin can see it.
They can't see anything there with all that growth.
You can see the house quite clearly now. Yeah, the house is quite visible now.
People are going around that curve. You mean they're going to take their eyes off the road and they're going to stare across the lake?
I do it every time I'm driving, making the turn. When the
think I'll drive behind you.
bathing corporation is on the left, you see the Jiffer house, you see the Scarborough house, you see the Jiffer house, you see the Scarborough house, you see the Bonet house. They're all quite prominent, and you don't have to take your eyes off the road for that long. It does form part of the historic streetscape of the westerly side of Lake Agawam.
So you're saying that no thought has been given to moving the house?
We would object to that as a condition with an enormous amount of respect.
Is
as
there
always.
room to do it? Moving the house to the west.
Moving the house to the west, excuse me? Then problems are created with the geothermal system, with the septic system. The lot narrows down. Where's the survey? And people should be careful what they wish for, because if that's the direction to go, then we're going to have people that are complaining because the improvements are not going to be where they are now, which is 41 feet. They're going to be forced. This is what happens. This is the lot proper. This is the wetlands area. You can't, it bottlenecks down. And you have this innovative system here. You have a geothermal, where's the geothermal system?
In the driveway.
In the driveway. It's all been very, very, accurately and thoughtfully plotted out. So if you move this thing 150, there's no room to move it. It's 98 feet. You move it back 50 feet, you can't do all of this stuff. And there's no reason why on a house in this neighborhood, in this size, I shouldn't be able to have a house of this size. The house of this size with its additions is still less than square footage than the house to the north. So if you push me back to a conforming setback here, there's no room for all of this stuff. Quite candidly, it's the sort of thing that I never considered because I never thought, respectfully, it would have been an appropriate request or appropriate condition. The lot bottlenecks. I can't get all of this stuff where it needs to go. I can't, it's not a sufficient envelope for redevelopment of the property. Some suggestion has been made, well, why don't you, some of the neighbors have suggested, why don't you just put an addition here? Well, that would be, then I'd be back here asking you for probably 7 or 8 times the wetlands relief. There was a request, some of the neighbors said, why is this addition going like this? Why don't you put it here, like this? That would be within wetland setbacks from over here. So this was a well thought out redevelopment plan utilizing only 520 square feet of addition within the 150 feet regulated area. That's not a lot. It's just not a lot. All of this, once you get out of this area here, all of this conforms. It conforms to zoning. It conforms to it's out of the regulated area. I don't think it's feasible.
Can I ask you, sir, I'm a little unclear, how many bedrooms are we talking about here?
There are existing 8 bedrooms.
Yes.
There will be 9.
How come I'm reading 16? And
Because
the
you're
architect,
reading misinformation.
I'm reading the architect said that this should be done, and I'm not looking at.
Look at John Foster's letter of,
I'm not sure he,
no, not only John Foster's letter, but the letter from the sanitary engineer.
about the Department of Health and stuff.
Yeah, Leon Rotner confirmed it with the
I don't know where that
health
letter is.
health department, 9 bedrooms, and that's why they. Yes, it is. Please, can I not have commentary during my presentation? Not from you, of course. I'll respond to anything you say, but commentary from the audience. Yes, Leon Rotner confirmed it with the health department, and I gave you the last meeting. I gave you the health department notice of incomplete application, which says they are satisfied with the system. Obviously, they've done the calculation based upon the number of bedrooms, and the only thing they're waiting for is this board to issue its wetlands approval. So it is, no matter how anyone tries to contort it, it's 9 bedrooms. There are currently 8, well, not 9. There have claims been made, well, that's a very large bedroom. Well, the state building code, correct me if I'm wrong, Lisa, says you can't walk through a bedroom to get to another bedroom. It doesn't matter how large the bedroom is. It's a 9-count bedroom. And the number of bathrooms is another thing. This is another red herring. Oh, well, a lot of bathrooms. The health department doesn't count bathrooms because bathrooms don't generate occupancy. Bedrooms
I understand, and I'm a little unclear about bathrooms, and I'm not
I
sure.
know, this is what's been very frustrating to me. There's been a hurricane of misinformation. So what do? I go and I sit with the agencies and I say, I think there are 9 bedrooms here. Tell me what you think. Because everyone's claiming, oh, there's more than 9 bedrooms. And the health department and the building inspector says there are 9 bedrooms and specifically says the objectant's attorney's bedroom count is in error. Now, if they have a problem with that, they have the opportunity in a separate proceeding, not this proceeding, in a separate proceeding to challenge that.
Okay.
I have the floor plans right in front of me. It shows 1 bedroom on the first floor, 5 on the second floor, and 3 on the third floor, which adds up to 9.
Yes, but who did that?
Well, it's their proposal.
Well,
Lisa
yes.
met with.
The architect.
I
Explain it,
understand.
Lisa.
Hi.
Right, it's just, to me, that is sort of the focal, pivotal point here, because then you need 15 parking spots.
Thank you.
Then your septic system is not doing any good because you've doubled the bedrooms. And if Mr. Fox has 1 child and is looking for a growing family, he better get busy.
Well, hold on a second. Wait a minute. I'm glad you're bringing this up because this has been the hurricane of misinformation. The health department approved this septic system based upon a set of plans. They don't just willy-nilly say, oh, I'm taking for granted this bedroom count. They analyze it and look at it. And then I said to Ms. Zaloga, who's standing right next to me, I want to stop this whole ambiguity. Meet with John Foster. Leon Rotner, who's the health engineer, says that it's 9 bedrooms. Whatever the number of bedrooms is, tell me what it is. 9 bedrooms.
Who's the health engineer?
Excuse me? Leon Rotner from Stephen Maresca's office.
So you hired him?
Yes.
You
Well,
know.
no, it's not just like that. I have an application to the health department. And you have it. That's why I gave you, I'll address it to council. That's why I gave you, and I'll address it to you, that's why I gave you at the first meeting, which is in the record, a notice of incomplete application from the health department that says we are satisfied with the system. This is a notice of incomplete application, which is a horrible misnomer, but this is what they do. Anyone who's worked with the health department knows that they keep on sending out these notices of incomplete application until they have everything they want from you, even though you've given them everything. So what does it say? Plans by Stephen Maresca, last revised 6/7/17, appear acceptable pending receipt and review of the Village Zoning Board of Appeals approval. All of these these boxes, if anyone's, you know, sometimes you deal with these things all the time. I apologize. You take certain knowledge for granted. My scope of knowledge is very narrow. It's like I'm a land use lawyer, so I know these things all the time, and I just unfortunately sometimes assume wrongly that because I'm so familiar with them, everyone else is. But this is what this says. This is a notice of incomplete application. It has 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 30, 35 check marks on it. And this is what the health department sends you if the system that they have sent to you, and I did in all fairness because I wanted to nail this bedroom issue down, explain all of this the last time. This is what they send you if they think your wastewater system has not been designed for the appropriate capacity given the plans that you've submitted them. They are ready to approve this system, which is based upon the 9-bedroom count. Nothing on the notice of incomplete application other than we're waiting, and this is because of their policy, we're waiting for this board to act. They're happy.
We can't act because we don't know about the bedrooms. I mean, we have
Yes, you do know about the bedrooms.
parking spaces to worry about.
Yes, you do. I'm
Would you like me to go
trying
over?
to satisfy your concern. You do know. Lisa, go over. This is based upon a meeting with the building inspector. So go over with Mr. DeVenny, step by step, the bedroom count.
So we've taken the existing plan and the proposed plan on one page, okay? So you can see what's existing and what's proposed. Both the village law as well as the health department law says that you have a kitchen, a living room, a dining room, and one bonus room, whether you call it a den or a family room, whatever you want to call it. Everything else counts as a bedroom. So on the first floor for the proposed, we have one bedroom that's in the wing over by the garage. Nothing in the garage area. The garden shed is unheated space. It's not habitable space, could never be counted as a bedroom.
Let me stop you right there. The objectants say, oh, they might fill that in the future. They might do something illegal. And you know something? You can't consider that. Because thank goodness the law has said you can't assume someone's going to act illegally. And excuse me, Lisa.
No problem, no problem. The covered porch on the east side of the house, again, unheated space, cannot be counted as habitable space, will not be considered a bedroom.
And again, they've said, oh, the covered porch, you're going to convert that to a bedroom. You cannot assume that someone is going to act illegally. Thank you.
So we come in the front door, the new location of the front door, into a foyer, which we walk through that to get to all of the other spaces in the house. We have our living room, our dining room, our kitchen, and the den is our one bonus room. So that does not count as a bedroom. So on the first floor, we have one proposed bedroom.
One bedroom.
The existing house didn't have any, quote, proposed existing bedrooms on the first floor, but the cottage did have a bedroom. So that's what that plan shows over there. So there was an existing bedroom on the
The
first floor,
cottage,
too.
which by the way is a pre-existing non-conforming structure, separate living quarters, which we're removing.
Correct. So on the second floor, you come up the landing, you come up the stair landing, and you go through a space, the foyer of the master bedroom, to get to the master bedroom. New York State Code, and it's written on this plan, it's a section 404.4.2, which John Foster uses as his determination for a bedroom, says that you cannot access a bedroom through another bedroom. So that room would not count as a bedroom. So you have the master bedroom, and then you have two other bedrooms in the existing portion of the house. In the guest wing area, again, you come up the stairs, you have a landing area that you walk through to get to two bedrooms. So on that level, we have 5 bedrooms, okay? In the existing portion of the house, you also came up the stairs, you had a landing, there were 4 bedrooms,
Okay.
okay?
So you have 8 parking spaces there, so
We have 8 parking spaces for 9 bedrooms.
did you have it on the map?
Yes,
Yep.
correct.
It's on the survey.
On the 3rd floor, again, you come up a landing, and there are 3 bedrooms on the 3rd floor. All 3 count. Again, there were 3 bedrooms on the 3rd floor in the existing house as well. Same general layout. So 9 bedrooms total.
Okay, you can understand there's a little bit of a discrepancy here with
Where?
16 and 9 and 8 and
Well,
whatnot.
no,
But not if you look at the habitable
manufactured
space.
fake news discrepancy. Well, that's what it is. You can say,
You
you
can't
can
say
say they're
unheated
20
space is
bedrooms, they're
ever a
50
bedroom.
bedrooms. You gotta, where's the proof? Here's the proof.
Okay.
I'm sorry.
We're just a citizen-based board here.
No,
How the
I-
heck are we supposed to know who's lying? and
Because,
You know? I didn't say you were lying. I said, how are we supposed to know who is and who isn't?
my biggest problem with this application has not been the substance of the application, but the manufactured information. There are not 16 bedrooms. Maybe that's why 380 people without standing signed a petition. Oh, there's 16 bedrooms. Well, they didn't, no one went through that with them like we just did. No one said the building inspector and the project architect went through it and agreed there were 9 bedrooms. No one said the health department has looked at this and made a determination that there are 9 bedrooms because they're ready to approve the septic system. So the discrepancy doesn't exist except in the minds of people who cannot get around the fact that this is a darn good application consistent with 27 years of approval from this board. The only time you've ever asked anybody to move a house is on Meadow Lane when the house is literally sitting in the wetlands. And somebody comes in and says, I'm going to pick it up, I'm going to move it back 20 feet, 25 feet, and probably going to reconstruct the whole house. None of which of those houses were historic houses. So talk about getting ping pong. I'm trying to preserve a historic house with a view shed. I'm trying to make sympathetic additions to it. I'll make all that argument before the Architectural Review Board, but none of that stuff belongs here, respectfully.
You're preserving 60% of the house, right?
No, we're going to preserve all of the house.
Okay,
Because when we withdrew the application for the height variance, okay, the only thing we're going to do is reconstruct, we're going to gut out the existing that western portion that we wanted the ability to tear down and reconstruct. The neighbors in the Southampton Association, that seemed to be their biggest bugaboo, and I said to my client, withdraw that part of the application. We're going to preserve that western facade. There's some minor fenestration changes on there. We're putting a dormer in where the 2 roof lines come in,
you showed us that. That's nice.
just so we can do an interior staircase. So the entire house is being preserved. Now, and we're adding additions which we feel confident that we'll be able to demonstrate to the Architectural Review Board are exactly the way you should further develop a house, a historic house, which is to make it subservient. I'm just touching on this. It doesn't belong here, but I want to give you comfort, okay? That is subservient to the rest of the house. Indeed, I always screw up the acronym, the Society for... SPLEA. That's the acronym, I'm sorry, but what is the name of it?
Long Island Antiquities.
The Society for Preservation of Long Island Antiquities has in the record a letter that says that they think that the additions are appropriate. Now, we're going to have to demonstrate that to the Architectural Review Board, but again, that has nothing to do with your jurisdiction.
You're only here for one thing.
I'm here for a wetlands approval for a 529 square foot addition that's in the portion of an addition that's in a regulated area, and I can't believe I've got to put up with this. I don't know how else to say it. No, I can't, because for 27 years I've been before this board, a 529 square foot addition in the regulated area, everything else, I'm not talking about putting up with you. I'm not talking about putting up with you. You're doing the job. You're putting me through the paces, as you always do, and I respect it. I'm talking about a campaign of absolute unmitigated misinformation, so much to the point that Mr. Devaney understandably says, well, I thought there were 16 bedrooms here. That's because you've been told 100 times. Okay, no, I'm not being critical, but that's because you've been told 100 times by people aggressively that there are 16 bedrooms, and we've, in a very, very, very professional way, have been saying to you that at the last meeting and at this meeting, hey, there's only 9.
Okay, well, it's aired, and I know something.
No, but how can you miss it? How can you miss it? You've had 4 ads in the Southampton Press which say the house is going to be demolished, say it's going to be a massive addition, say it's going to be destroyed, they're going to tear it down. It's all false.
You
So,
got the message.
thank you. And if I get a little bit worked up about it,
No,
it's...
you often get worked up, we know.
Thank you.
You were here
So-
for 30 years, I know it's
It's a genetic predisposition. It's from a Celtic island. So sorry.
We're both Irish.
Okay. Anything else?
You got any other questions?
You want to talk about a little bit about the view sheds, Tim? Can you do that?
If you like.
Okay.
Mr. Chairman, members of the board, Tim Rupp from Harris Design for the applicant. This document that's on the table right now was submitted back before the June meeting. So we just wanted to just show you this. It's part of the whole package that was submitted. And we did a little analysis of the view shed from 452 as well as I'm not sure the... Stevens, yeah, the Stevens house. And you can see relative to, and this is an aerial that we've used, and we've put the proposed addition in this general area where it's going. These are the setbacks. This also shows the existing vegetation that does exist in on the site, and what and the lack of impact of the proposed additions to the house will have. You'll see the cone of visions that we've shown from general areas, on terraces for the 452 and as well as Stevens house. And the proposed additions will not impact any of those existing view sheds towards the lake.
Now, these are things, again, which are more appropriate for a variance application. But again, we want to give you comfort that we're doing something that's extremely sensitive to the neighbors and to the area. People have actually suggested that this board and the Architectural Review Board can tell us that we can't add on to this house. There are probably 50 historic homes in the village of Southampton that have been added on to. No board has ever said you can't add on to a historic house. The question is whether or not it is compatible. I mean, I'll give you the most extreme example is the house next to, it was, what's the house on Ox Pasture? It was the Lloyd Smith house. Mm-hmm. You'll all remember that little beautiful gardener's house that was to the west. That house became one wing of a house of, it's 5 times. Yeah, 5 times. That was a contributing structure. The house on the end of Captain's Neck Lane, where it has the joined garages. The southerly house has been tripled in size with an addition that takes that, I guess for lack of, I'm not an architectural critic, but that it's a brick Georgian house and makes it 3 or 4 times the size. No one has ever said you can't add on to a historic house. And so we're doing something that's extremely sensitive. And we'll make that application to the Architectural Review Board, and we feel confident that we'll be able to convince them that what we're doing is sensitive. But again, I give you this for your comfort to know that we're being sensitive, but it really doesn't have anything to do with what we're asking you to do.
Thank you.
Mark, any questions? Any questions, Bo?
Not at the moment.
Dick?
Just to clarify, and it has to do with the amount of coverage in the jurisdiction area, and I heard a lot of numbers. I just wanted
They're on the
to show
chart,
that.
yes.
I heard 520 square feet, 525, 529, and 592.
592.
One number?
592.
So, and that's what I saw in the paperwork.
592.
Okay.
Habitable, habitable.
And that's consistent with the paperwork. But I
Thank
just
you,
wanted
Chair.
to...
And that's, your confusion is a result of my being sloppy with the,
Possibly dyslexic,
With the numbers.
529, 592, I get that. Okay.
I apologize.
John, then, if 592, you said is habitable,
Correct.
so what is the reference to the uninhabitable space?
294 square feet of porches.
There's 294 square feet of porches. But there's a reduction of coverage in other areas.
So 592 is going to be enclosed space?
Correct.
Heated.
Yes, habitable, correct. And I think did you approve on that? I think that was for quite a bit more coverage. The one you approved this evening was for, we calculated about 1,200 square feet of coverage on Lake Agawam.
1,200.
Is 12 square feet of additional coverage. Lisa, do you remember what it was?
They had 735 square feet of habitable space, and then they had several hundred square feet of porches, and almost 800 square feet of impervious patios and walkways, and about 300 square feet of driveway. So all told, yeah, you're probably right.
2-3 lots down, approved it this evening, and you did so appropriately and wisely. and consistent with your decisions for the last 27 years.
No other questions?
Is there anyone from the public who would like to be heard? Please come up.
Oh, thank you, Patrick.
Good evening, Mr. Chairman, members of the board, Mr. Robinson, Patrick Fife, Toomey, Latham, Shea, Kelly, Dubin, and Quateraro, 51 Hill Street. Here tonight, again, on behalf of Robert Giffra and Joyce Giffra, the owners of 452 First Neck Lane, and Whitney Stevens, the owner of 468 First Neck Lane. While my clients certainly appreciate the applicant's withdrawal of the height variance request, we view that only as a first step. This board needs to address the unprecedented request to increase the footprint of the existing house 175% and double the number of rooms through the use of a connector over the wetland setback. The key point, and I think Mr. Bennett actually illustrated it for me, is the board needs to focus on the fact that none of these additional additions proposed by the applicant are permitted without going through the wetland setback. This whole addition is within your jurisdiction. The additional square footage cannot be built as of right. The wetlands connector is the linchpin to this massive increase in density. Mr. Bennett himself said just now today, quote, "We have to connect," close quote. He made a series of admissions that this is a house that you can't build even if you moved it off the wetlands. You shouldn't get a house of this size when you knowingly bought this property and this house in the condition that it was in. Mr. Bennett himself said it's not feasible to put this house anywhere else. He's asking for extraordinary relief, and I think you have to view this application in that context. We're not just talking about it's 592 feet. We're talking about 175% increase in the footprint that couldn't otherwise happen but for this wetlands connector. Mr. Bennett made a series of statements today. The last hearing, I know today, he said the application's not problematic whatsoever. This is a reasonable, the addition is as reasonable as possible. I think if C-Mac Sammy, who's here with me this evening, just has a couple of boards. I just want you to see what is being proposed in relationship to what the current application with the withdrawal of the height variance.
The ones that you showed us last month, right?
They're different. They've been updated. We did get the applicant's revised plans on July 18th. Mr. Sammy prepared some additional boards that show what this proposal is going to look like. And I think, you hold on one second, I'm sorry. I think you can honestly see, I'll leave it down, that this proposal is still an extraordinarily aggressive request that could not be built as of right without a wetlands special permit. Here's an additional view. Again, I think the applicants mischaracterized this application to say that all you're looking at is 592 feet. I can build everything else here. No, you can't. You can't build it without the connection. That puts everything here within your jurisdiction, and not only should you, but I think you're obligated to look at this project as a whole. This is an application to build a second house. This aerial photo, which shows the proposed house and the addition in relationship to the surrounding area, it puts in perspective exactly how large the footprint of this house is going to be relative to everything. But I ask you this question. If the applicant's house was here to begin with, in the spot where his proposed addition is, you would never, ever grant him the extraordinary relief of building 2,000 to 3,000 square feet in the wetland setback.
So that would be if it wasn't there, but it is there.
No, but I'm saying, but you would be giving him the same result if you approved this application.
But it's there.
Correct, it is there. It's a benefit that it's there.
It's not there.
No. My point is you would be giving the applicant something that he couldn't otherwise get. Mr. Bennett made the point for me tonight that you can't have this house if you pull it back. I mean, there's an extraordinary benefit to what is being asked for here, and this entire project is within your jurisdiction. That wetlands connector is a linchpin. And it just amazes me that someone could say that this is a very non-aggressive application and that there's precedent for it. This is a 592 square foot extension on the wetlands as a means to connect to a second house. The applicant can keep changing the names of the rooms, bedrooms, gyms, landings. I'll get to that in a bit. But this project unquestionably increases the property's density, doubling the number of rooms in the main house. And I just ask you these questions. What are these rooms for? And who adds 10 rooms and 6 bathrooms to their house unless the plan is to have more guests? And if you believe the applicant that all these additional rooms are not going to be used as bedrooms, and again, I'm going to get into this in more detail, what's to stop the next owner from coming in and making them bedrooms? It wouldn't be illegal to turn space that the applicant's actually not showing on his plans as uninhabitable space. He's counting it in his calculations as habitable additions to the house. Nothing would stop anybody, the applicant included, from making this supposed covered porch that has a connected bathroom and wet bar and closet into a bedroom.
John made that point. We cannot assume somebody's going to do something illegal. We can't assume that.
But it wouldn't be illegal. He's asking for that to be habitable space. It's not shown as a porch.
It's a screened-in porch.
That area is not on the plan. That's actually, okay. Look,
I don't want you to get us confused as you're trying to do.
I will go through the floor plan, and I'm not trying to confuse you. I don't want to do that.
There's enough confusion about this application already.
I agree, and I think as much as I'm being accused or the objectants are being accused, I think a lot of confusion, and I'll show you, has also come from the applicants themselves. Once this is approved, or if it's ever approved, the damage is done, and it's not just to this property, it's to everywhere. Approving this application is going to set a dangerous precedent for every single house on the lake or on the wetlands to ask to do the same thing. This board can't let that happen. This is not just what my clients want. This is what the community has asked for, not just the people in the online petition, which I'm going to hand up just to the extent there are comments from village residents within there, and I don't believe it's been submitted as part of the record. But there's also been over 35 letters in opposition to this board from affected neighbors, local residents, concerned environmental groups such as the Peconic Baykeeper and the Lake Agawam Conservation. Association. Just so the record's clear, because I know there was some confusion last time as to what had been submitted, I just have an updated chart showing all the letters and some of the additional letters that were submitted since the last hearing. And I just would ask that be made part of the record. People don't want the next chapter in this village's rich history to be about Lake Agawam's toxicity. Building a wetlands connector requires the applicant to demonstrate clear and convincing manner under the village code. The proposed activity, and Mr. Bennett didn't get to this, must satisfy a, quote, pressing economic or social need, close quote. The board needs to consider the proposed activity with reference to, and these are key words, the protection or enhancement of the wetlands. Those words, protection and enhancement, especially when it comes to Lake Agawam, are critical. The lake is at its knees. Mr. Grover's going to speak more to this. It's on the verge of death. I don't think it's in dispute that it's become dangerous.
You only gave us one copy?
It's the online.
It's just additional copies of letters that were already submitted. The applicant's expert, Mr. Lombardo, actually in his report stated that Lake Agawam was the first water body in New York State this year to suffer from harmful algae blooms. I just don't think that's what we want this village to be known for in the future. Unless the village takes appropriate action, something serious beyond what happened at Georgica Pond, where a dog died several years ago from this, is going to happen. The board should adopt the precedent that enough is enough. It should heed the recommendations, and I haven't heard this addressed at all by the applicant. The Lake Agawam Comprehensive Management Plan says that, quote, control of additional density increases within the watershed should be carefully monitored and limited wherever possible. The comprehensive plan is talking about the entire watershed, not just the wetland setback. Again, look at these pictures of what the applicant is proposing. How is this carefully monitoring and limiting increased density? I just can't see how anyone can say that with a straight face. The presumption should be that increased development is only allowed within wetland setbacks on Lake Agawam under exceptional circumstances. This proposal calls for too much density. The house is already entirely within the wetlands, and this is a tremendous benefit to the applicant. The nature of this application is unprecedented. I take a tremendous disagreement with Mr. Bennett's characterization of this as a normal application. This board's never issued a wetland special permit like this, allowing somebody to connect to, in effect, what is the second house. The record contains 20-plus years worth of wetland special permits, and not one of them is remotely close to this application. Mr. Bennett's submission from July 18th referenced two specific properties, 63 Linden Lane. That was a small 2,100 square foot house. The total footprint increase was 52%, nothing close to the 175% we have here. 259 South Main Street, this was even smaller. The lot coverage increase was 16%, 836 square feet, the bulk of which was for a garage and space that was put over an existing covered porch that was on a concrete slab. The types of approvals the board has granted here are for additions, 1-, 2-room additions, expansions of rooms, pools. A good example, and it was in my July 26th letter, 400 First Neck, the Noel property. Just to show you, and it's in my, I've already submitted this, I'm just going to show it. It's part of Exhibit B to what I had submitted. This line right here, and this is part of the ZBA file, is the 150-foot wetland setback line. And the proposed additions, they're highlighted in the gray. I mean, that's the nature of the type of additions that have been granted. And I give this example to you because I think it illustrates what other properties could do if you issue this type of approval. A slight connection here, again, a wetlands connector special permit, And you've dramatically increased the ability for a property like this to substantially increase the footprint of the main house when it couldn't otherwise do so. That's the danger in this type of approval. And I think it really is an improper way to characterize this as being only about 592 square feet. This application does not meet the wetland standards. Again, there's no pressing or economic social need. The main house, already 7 bedrooms, 7 bathrooms. There's a pool house, a cottage on this property that total over 6,500 square feet of living space. The only possible convenience that this property is lacking at this point is a garage, admittedly. No one's saying that the applicant doesn't have the right to include a garage on its property. It certainly does, and it can do that in a conforming location that wouldn't impact the wetland setback. The application does not lead to the protection or enhancement of the lake as required by the village code. I'm going to leave that discussion to Mr. Grover. I'm not the scientist. But just whether or not you call these rooms, the applicant calls these rooms bedrooms or not, the density on this project is going to cancel out the nitrogen-reducing benefits of an advanced system. Lake Agawam is so polluted, the only way to protect and enhance it is to require the applicant to reduce the proposed density and have an advanced system. That's the horse trade that Mr. Bennett referenced in his application. He talked about applicants coming in here and horse trading. This isn't a horse trade. I mean, this is highway robbery in effect. He's coming in and asking for a second house and using a wetland special permit to do it. This is the only way to control additional density increases as required by the comprehensive management plan. I'd urge you to take careful look at Mr. Lombardo's report. That's the expert that the applicants proffered. While he claims that this project is beneficial because of supposed nitrogen reduction, his 2003 Lake Agawam Water Quality Restoration Plan, which Mr. Bennett had waved around at the last hearing, actually takes the position, and this is his quote, nitrogen control is unlikely to produce any appreciably significant Lake Agawam water quality benefits. He also noted that phosphorus needs to be controlled to restore Lake Agawam's water quality, yet his report for this application notes that even with only 9 bedrooms, phosphorus loading will increase by 12%. Mr. Grover is going to go through this, that in order to protect and enhance the lake, both phosphorus and more importantly nitrogen, which Mr. Lombardo seems to disagree with, but that they both need to be controlled through reductions in loading, and this project will not allow that to happen until the density is substantially reduced. With respect to density, the issue of the bedroom count, I do want to go through a couple things. First, I think it's a misrepresentation to say that the health department has approved anything here. It's Alice in Wonderland to say a notice of incomplete application equals an approval. The health department's waiting for this board to reach a conclusion on the wetlands special permit application. And then the second point is Mr. Bennett acknowledged the appropriate standard for bedroom counts at the last hearing. His testimony was rooms labeled as libraries or gyms are bedrooms. And to quote specifically, if it looks like a bedroom, walks like a bedroom, quacks like a bedroom, it's a bedroom.
There is no library here, there is no gym.
The last set of plans, not the ones that he showed my client, the plans that were filed on this application, May 31st, showed a gym. And I don't know if Mr. Bennett didn't realize that, and it was erased. And now it's called the landing. And in fact, the plans here that the applicant has on page 1, it's 100.40. I'll put it down, I'm sorry. It's call the actually, the issue, and I just want to go through this, is a distinction in what even Mr. Zaloga just had testified to. She said that the additional room that the applicant has, they're called, quote, bonus room, was this den, and there's no other room. 101.00, they show a family room. as well on this plan. That wasn't in one of the other plans that they submitted in connection with the application. Family room, den, and a living room. One of those rooms has to be counted under the code as a bedroom. There's no question. The covered porch is not...
What plans I have, but I don't see any family room on these plans. I see a large kitchen, dining room, living room. and then
These are the plans that were provided to us by the applicant. They are sheet number
I have 101.00.
revised July 18th, 2017. That was an exhibit to Mr. Bennett's submission. That was not the floor plans that were actually provided by the architect. The architect's floor plans that were submitted in connection with this application show a family room right here and a den.
That's the kitchen.
It's
It's not a
labeled
large
as
kitchen, but it's the kitchen.
Exactly.
family room. The kitchen includes here plus a breakfast area. So the kitchen is now, I guess, as the applicants claim, it's 3 rooms. They have a family room shown here. They have a den shown here. This covered
Is that the
porch,
latest?
this is the latest, yes, July 18, 2017. These are the latest plans that were provided by the applicant. Up in the right-hand, top right-hand corner, I'm sorry, revision. The original date was June 22nd, the issue, but July 18th.
It's one room.
I know.
It's one room.
He's saying that this part here is a family.
In addition, this proposed covered porch gardening shed areas, there's nowhere in the application that identifies these as non-habitable living space. In fact, the site plan shows the area of these as, they're not, the covered porch is not identified as additional porch space. It's identified as habitable space. And to the extent you're going to just believe the applicant's representation, there would be nothing illegal if this gets approved of making this habitable space. There's nothing here to reflect that this is not going to be habitable space. It's just, and again, I'm not going to bring out the original plans that the applicant had provided my client. They're already in the record. But these spaces were identified as bedrooms. This is simply changing labels on a floor plan. I mean, there's a wet bar, there's a full closet and a bathroom. There's a door to the exterior. Same thing on this gardening shed. The landing. The original plans the applicant filed with this board on May 30th or 31st showed this area as a gym. Mr. Bennett then got up on June 22nd and told you gyms count as bedrooms. July 18th, they submit a plan that simply crossed out the word. They got the eraser out, crossed this out, and now call it a landing. The master bedroom foyer was previously a sitting room on the last plans. I think the board needs to look at the game that's going on here. I'm not changing labels on rooms. The applicant is the one who's changing the labels on the rooms.
So in the second, as you referred to, the second house, does that have a kitchen?
The second house it does not have a full kitchen. They show a wet bar in the covered porch bed slash, or I'll call it a bedroom addition. But no, there is no second kitchen shown on that. I think the code, to the extent the building inspector's made his determination on this, I respectfully disagree. The code, your village code, was drafted to take into account the potential to use a room as a bedroom and to avoid these ridiculous back and forth disputes over, I'm going to label it a porch, he's going to call it a bedroom. The code's clear. The rooms Ms. Zaloga identified, if you're over those rooms, they're bedrooms. Correctly applying the code is crucial. I'd ask the board to take a hard look at this on its own and make a determination with respect to bedroom count. And I think not only does that impact sanitary flow, but as the board had recognized, it also impacts the parking, which the applicant's only shown sufficient parking for a 9-bedroom house. The applicant also has not applied for and can't meet the criteria needed to increase the degree of nonconformity of his nonconforming structure. I know Mr. Bennett's position is that this is not a variance application. They have not applied for an additional variance. It's our position they needed to apply for one. They're increasing the nonconformity here by 29%. It's not an insignificant number. I mean, the 592 square feet represents a 29% increase in the nonconformity of the wetland setback on the existing house. With respect to this point, I need to correct a few things that were stated at the last hearing and remarks made by Mr. DePietris. And it was his position that the wetland setbacks are not zoning setbacks. Respectfully, I believe that's an incorrect position. The wetland setbacks are part of Chapter 116 of the Village Code, which you know is the village's zoning code. They are no less setbacks than any other setback in the zoning code, and they are certainly not just standards, but they're requirements. But I think the second point was he took me to task on the position saying that this has been litigated and upheld. It has not been litigated. I realize the board has determined in prior cases that that's the way it believes that with respect to increase of nonconformity of a completely nonconforming structure, with respect to wetlands, a variance is not needed. But a court has never reached that determination. So I wanted to make sure that the record was clear on that and that we're not advocating a position that is somehow frivolous or has been upheld by a court. That's simply not true. The impact of the second story on this proposed addition with respect to the variance criteria will have a tremendous impact, not only on my clients, but other houses in the community as well. The increased density is also going to mean more guests, more cars, more noise, greater potential for even larger parties. The board needs to consider that. The board also needs to consider that the applicant has alternative means to accomplish reasonable objectives. As I mentioned, he can have a garage. No one's disputing that. And if he truly feels more rooms are necessary, there are ways to build a much, much more modest addition without the degree of intensity proposed by the applicant that would also require a lot less of an intrusion into the wetland setback. The applicant knew he was buying a historic home situated completely over the wetlands when he purchased the property in 2012 for over $10 million. He shouldn't get the dual benefit of being able to keep that house and effectively get permission to build a house that's connected to it that's just as large. The applicant, I think also, I want to point out something that Mr. Bennett tried to illustrate as a benefit of this project and a reduction in lot coverage. It's important to note, I've got some aerial photographs here. I apologize, I only have one set to be stamped in, but I will show them up on the board, and I'll have additional copies if the board would like it. In 2010, the applicant's now making much light of the fact that they're reducing the coverage of the driveway. 2010, this was the applicant's driveway before he purchased the home. A portion of this vegetated area in the center appears to be within 125 feet of the wetland setback. The applicant's current driveway, someone filled that in, paved it. And now the applicant's trying to tell you, I'm doing such great things by reducing the footprint of the paved surfaces. He illegally increased the footprint without any permits to begin with. Same thing, and we pointed this out in our initial submission, 2010, his pool house up here, which was actually destroyed by a fire and rebuilt without a special wetlands permit, and the code requires reconstruction of a structure under the wetlands special permit to actually obtain one. But not only did he rebuild without a wetlands special permit, he increased, almost doubling the size of the existing patio that was there, and he added a new patio that wasn't there. And the applicant now is actually asking to keep that patio. Again, no application, nothing referenced on the application that he needs a wetland special permit. But essentially, more than doubling the size of the patio space in a very sensitive area. I mean, I think that's, if not one of the closest areas on the entire property as far as existing structures to the wetlands. But so to the extent the applicant is trying to demonstrate to you certain things that have been done that are really benefits, at least with respect to these issues, they're truly not benefits. And not only that, he hasn't even made the appropriate applications to this board now to validate and legalize these structures. I think the board needs to look at that, and at a minimum, the applicant needs to amend its application to address these issues. And it's disturbing. I think it also shows, just as I was saying, in terms of making changes, these things happen. I'm not singling out the applicant. I'm sure there's other people within the village who have made changes to their property illegal. They happen. But it's happened repeatedly on this property, first. But second, I think it offers a perspective that you need to look at, especially when you're looking at the bedroom count and the way that it's evaluated. My final point on tonight, with respect to my submission, would be I think it's necessary for this board to have the Architectural Review Board at least weigh in on this application. I think in one response to one question from you, Mr. Chairman, Mr. Bennett himself answered and said, well, you would have to ask Mr. Studenhoff. So I think that in and of itself demonstrated at least some need to look at the issue, especially to the extent you ask questions about moving the historic structure. I know we've made a legal argument why referral is necessary. I take issue with Mr. Bennett. It's not just in connection with use variances. The code specifically states that any other variances fall under that particular code provision. But in addition, I don't think there's anything wrong with you consulting with the Architectural Review Board. I mean, this board, in the past, you consult with the building inspector. I don't think there's any requirement in the code that says you have to do that, or that, I mean, you certainly have reasonable latitude and the ability to use your common sense. And for Mr. Bennett to say that it would somehow be illegal for you to do that, I just think that's plain wrong. I think there's been many times, I mean, you consult with Mr. Voorhees. There's nothing in the code, I think, that requires Mr. Voorhees to be here, but yet he's here every meeting. So I think, just aside from the legal argument, I think it's the sensible one. The applicant is proposing to make a significant addition to one of the most significant historical structures in this village. And he's also seeking, and in the actual plans, not only to renovate the front, I mean, the words are used, reconstruct portions of it, which that does require relief from you, whether it's a variance, but it does require a wetland special permit. You can't reconstruct within the setback without a wetland special permit. So to the extent that any approvals that are ultimately issued by the board do weigh on the future of this historic structure, I think it's only sensible to coordinate a review of this application with the Architectural Review Board. I don't have any further remarks at this time, but I would like, if the board would let me, to just pass the torch briefly to Mr. Sammy, who has a few more boards to show you, again, depicting the impact.
Patrick, before you go, the issue of the wetland setback, as argued by your client, that is a zoning, the equivalent of a zoning setback, and you had the dialogue with Rick about that at the previous meeting.
Yes.
Have you done any research with state law on that, state cases or anything?
I have.
Anything?
I haven't seen anywhere where that position has been taken, that a wetland setback is not a setback. And is not a requirement, and that it wouldn't trigger. I mean, I think obviously every code is written differently in multiple jurisdictions. I've certainly searched within this particular village. There's been never a determination by a court that the position that we're taking is not a correct one. So
Was there a case that you found where it took the opposite position, that the position as described by Rick was validated?
I can't say I saw, any cases where that position was validated either way.
Thank you. John?
Can I respond directly to this? The Village Code section, this is exactly what Mr. Petras was informing Mr. Pfeiffer, and it's in the Greenwald case.
Was that litigated? John, was that litigated, or was that just a
No,
decision? That's a
no.
Greenwald decision?
No, it was a Greenwald decision. It was a decision of this board. So that's the determination of this board. And my understanding is that absent legislation, that's what the law is. And it's a reasonable determination, and if it's a reasonable determination given by the board that's charged with the enforcement of the law, it's entitled to be upheld. The Village Code has a separate article for wetlands. By the way, the definition of a non-conforming use says that it doesn't comply with the dimensional requirements of the zoning code. The Village Wetlands Law specifically defines the areas as regulated areas. It's not a setback. The area within 150 feet of the boundary of a wetland for any structure, I'm reading from the definition, I'm not making this up, regulated area. The area within 150 feet of the boundary of a wetland for any structure or building, or the area within 200 feet of the boundary of a wetland for any septic discharge system, or the area within 125 feet of the boundary of a wetland for clearing land, etc. Regulated area also may be extended by the village board in accordance with this section. It's a regulated area.
Thank you.
It doesn't fit within the definition, the very specific definition of a non-conforming use. For 27 years, this board has taken this position.
I understand your position. Thank you.
And it's the position of Mr. Petras.
Mr. Robinson, I have a question. It's been alleged that there have been two zoning violations, things done without variances, and that perhaps they should be relisted. Are we just going to glide over that, or is that an issue?
No, we're going to address that.
I did address it the last time.
Okay.
Mr. Fife told me that his client was aware. His client, under his very specific sections of the village law, first of all, let me back up. These alleged violations have certificates, building permits, and certificates of occupancy. Okay? If anyone had a problem with that, they had 60 days from the date of the issuance of either the building permit or the certificate of occupancy to bring it to this board. None of that was done. That
was the certificate of compliance, John?
Certificate of compliance for this pool house. The pool house was originally built by Peter Tufo. There's an interesting history which is worthwhile for a second. The pool house was built by Peter Tufo when Mr. Tufo put a fireplace in the pool house. John Foster issued a stop work order saying you have a source of heating in the pool house. Mr. Foster was then approached by various trustees. Why did you issue a stop work order on Peter Tufo's pool house? Because it's a source of heating. Is a fireplace a source of heating? He was asked. Okay. And then the village code was changed to say that a fireplace in an accessory structure should not be deemed a source of heating. So this pool house was not only built, it gave rise to a change in the village code. There was a fire. It was rebuilt with a building permit and and has a certificate of occupancy. That certificate of occupancy is in the record, and it was never challenged. And under this section, Village Law 7712, forgive me, I don't know the subsections, but it's in my letter. If anyone had a problem with that, if anyone had a problem with that, including another board, they had 60 days to challenge it. That 60 days is long gone. So no, it's not germane, other than to say it's perfectly legal.
And what about the driveway situation? Same thing?
Not aware of that, but the driveway is being proposed to be reconstructed.
Good evening, board members, Chairman, CNX Sami Architect. I'm representing Mr. Jeffra and Mr. Whitney Stevens, neighbors to this applicant. I would like to very briefly and quickly just provide to the board and to the record basically architectural drawings, 3D architectural drawings that basically put this, what's being proposed in a better perspective as far as understanding what's being proposed, so that for your record you would have a copy of that. One drawing that I would like to bring the attention of the board to, which is what's being proposed as far as this addition. The one bedroom, one additional bedroom, and two-car garage basically is close to a 5,000 square foot house, more than the existing footprint, and basically GFA, total GFA of the existing house being proposed. This house, this addition, sits 70 feet away from Mr. Jeffro's house, 125 feet away from Miss Stevens' house, 190 feet away from Mr. Bonnet's house, and 400 feet away from Mr. Scarborough's house. We all are very familiar with the location of this so prominently on a peninsula on Lake Agawam. This property is on a flag drive. It is in zone R120, 120,000 square feet.
I interrupt you for a minute. We were told it's not a flag lot. It's got frontage.
Well, let me shed some light on that.
Building inspector issued a determination saying it was not.
Building,
That's in the record.
I would just basically simply say that if you read the definition of a flag lot, this lot falls under the Village Code's definition of a flag lot. Ownership of the flag lot is never brought into the definition of what a flag lot is. Also, I think that there was some talk about a 40-foot front yard, that this is wider than a 40-foot yard, but that again is not a language that is in the code book of the village. If you do read the code of the village of Southampton as far as what a flag lot is, this is a flag lot. I will also read to the record definition of a flagpole: a lot shaped like a pole with a fully extended flag at the upper portion thereof, the bottom of the pole being at the street line, the pole portion of the lot being designed for use as access to the flag portion of the lot where the principal structure is or will be constructed. That is a definition of a flag lot in the code. As I said, this is a lot that is in an R120 zone. R120 zone, 120,000 minimum lot size. The size of this lot, including the flag, is 110. Again, as you know, definition of a flag lot, the flag portion of it, the pole portion of it is not supposed to be added into that calculation. That brings the size of this just above 80,000, 88 and change as far as the lot size. So a non-conforming lot in that sense in an R120 with a house existing on it, and what's being proposed is a secondary house more than the existing size of the house to its north and northwest. These drawings, I'm going to quickly go through them, depict first of all the floor plans, the ground floor, as you can see. Again, this is an issue of relationship of scale. When we're talking about one bedroom and a garage, this is the garage portion of it. The rest of it is the one bedroom in one floor and in the second floor. And as you can see on the third floor, the new wing in relationship to the existing building. I have prepared elevations here. At the top are the existing house, and at the bottom, in light color, existing house, and in red shade, the additions to it. Again, this gives architectural definition of what's there and what's being added. This is the view facing the west, which is the entrance to the house. This is the view to the south, facing basically the ocean. This is the view to Lake Agawam. You can see basically the existing house has a 40-foot span, the bulk of it, and an additional 70 feet added to the north of it on Lake Agawam. And this is the wing at about 30 feet away from the property line to the south of Mr. Jeffress' property, basically a wall of a building with a second story on top of this wing, basically. If this were to be built as a conforming addition without attaching it to the existing house, obviously the second story would not be possible. These are some 3D graphics showing again the context of the house in relationship to what's around it. This is Mr. Jeffress' house over here. That's the subject applicant's property. And this is what's being added. Basically a second house in between Mr. Jeffress and the existing house. This is the entry approach to the house as it exists today. This is the view that is very close to what Ms. Stevens sees today. And this is what's going to be added to the existing house. Again, the entry side of it. Existing and proposed. This is the lakeside view, looking from the lake at the building. And this is the addition of it to the north and west. This site plan, again, shows views from the neighboring properties exactly at a 6-foot eyesight, what they would see from Mr. Jeffress' house. You can see the wall of the second store. And by the way, this landscaping, this is basically a tree that does screen portion of this in summertime, but not in wintertime. This is the view from the Stevens residence, what they would see. Again, a second house sitting 30 feet away from the existing house. This is a view from Mr. Bonnet's house. And this is the view from the end of Lake Agawam, one of the iconic views of Southampton Village. We have a few of them that the village is known for, and this is, besides the main street, the Veterans Memorial at the end of the park. This would be one of them right up there, driving down with the Dune Church at one side of it, Mr. Scarborough's house on the other, Chuck Scarborough's house, and then Mr. the Malcomanto house and Mr. Jeffress' house. This would be that view that would be affected. We do concede that removal of that variance for the height and addition to the height basically address some concerns that we had, and these are architectural concerns which I'm not going to address here, but we're still having a second basically residence being built sandwiched between this lot and the northern lot next to it. The historic photo of Malcomanto when it was built, slightly larger than what it is today. This gives you a perspective of if this house were to be added and expanded with historic preservation in mind, this is what you would get. Mind you, yes, in a wetland, or as you mentioned, the option of moving it back from the wetland is also an option into a conforming location.
Could I address the flag lot issue? Because I think it's an appropriate time to do it, if I may. Thank you. That's the definition that Mr. Sami read is actually a definition in a vacuum. The village code, with the Village of Southampton, as with the town code, states that the minimum lot frontage for a lot has to be 40 feet. If you have in excess of 40 feet, it's not, by definition, a flag lot. So, on April 19th, 2017, I wrote the following letter to Mr. Foster confirming a conversation which he countersigned. This is in the record. Thank you for taking the time to meet with us regarding 472 First Neck Lane, Southampton. Attached, please find a copy of an existing condition survey for the subject property. As discussed, the property maintains a front road frontage of 46 feet on First Neck Lane. As such, this lot is not considered a flag lot. Please, provided you concur with the above determination, we ask that you countersign the letter and return a copy to our office. Again, thank you for your time, signed by Mr. Foster, part of the record. As it relates to the bedrooms, a letter July 18th, 2017, letter to Suffolk County Department of Health Services from Patrick Fife. Mr. Fife this is very interesting, Mr. Fife tried to interrupt the processing of our application in the health department. There's no public forum, they don't have public hearings, but he tried to interrupt our application to the health department by claiming that there were more than 9 bedrooms. They obviously ignored him, and indeed Mr. Foster, in a letter of July 18th, referencing Mr. Fife's letter and referencing this application, in reference to the above letter of Patrick Fife, architect Lisa Zaloga contacted me to address concerns of bedroom calculations per Southampton Village Code, combined with the New York State Building and Fire Safety Codes applicable to 472 First Neck Lane. Ms. Zaloga and I met several times, and Ms. Zaloga produced a 3-page set of drawings issued July 18th, 2017. Copy next. The drawings correctly address the Village Code with the New York State Building and Fire Safety Codes. Therefore, the total number of bedrooms proposed is 9, not 17, as incorrectly addressed previously by Patrick B. Fife, Toomey, Latham, Shea, Kelly, Dubin, and Corderero. Now, it is, as Mr. Robinson will tell you, the province of the building inspector to determine and interpret the zoning code. And that's what's been done in both instances. These are in the record, but I'll give you additional copies. Just for example, you can't, and Ms. Zaloga will tell you this, you can't walk through a bedroom to get through a bedroom. You can't say because there's a sitting area and a kitchen, that's a bedroom. It doesn't work that way. Oh, finally, CMAC said that the proposed addition will be as big as the existing house. The existing house, and this is in the record, has a gross floor area of 5,031 square feet. The house after these additions, 7,202 square feet, so it's a 2,161 square foot addition, GFA. Existing house, this is in the record, 503 square feet, proposed total 7,202, increased 2,161. By the way, 1,000 square feet less than Mr. Gifford's house to the north. The most vociferous objection. Massive house. Hardly.
If I may shed some light on square footages here. The existing house, first floor, is 2,048. The proposed first floor house, without the garage, without an 800 square foot garage, is at 4,757. Second floor is 1970 existing, proposed 3,146. That's the footprint, but what's calculated in the GFA, 2,102. And then the third floor, 698 existing, proposed 339. Total, existing house 4,717 square feet, proposed house 8,242 square feet. I've submitted these to the file for your record.
Take his numbers. It's
Also-
6,000 square feet less than allowed, than 6,000 square feet less than permitted. Take his numbers.
Also, just to put a point also regarding last meeting, I recommend that the board consider submitting this application to the architectural board because this is a historic house and on the also National Register of Historic Houses.
Would you recommend? I'm sorry, I didn't get that.
To submit this application to the architectural board so that the consultant, the historic consultant to the architectural board could shed some light on the historic significance of this house and the expansion of this house in relationship to that. This would just provide you with additional information for making your judgment, even though your judgment is simply associated with the wetland permit, but it's best for you to have all the information available to you. This will not be the end of this application. It would have to go to the architectural board. We are not requesting the architectural board to actually make a final statement on it, simply for its consultant, the historic consultant, to write a report on the nature of this proposal and submit it both to the architectural board and the ZBA, and with that, the ZBA considering such a large expansion to existing historic house. Expansion that without this 592 plus porch would not be possible as a wetland permit application. Thank you.
I'm sorry to have to come up again. And I'd certainly ask that the record be left open in this application. There's a lot of open questions, additional submissions that were just made today that no one's had a chance to review, us and you included. And given the discussion, there was just a number of issues, new issues raised just moments ago. But I have to just in a minute or two respond to a couple things. First, regarding the violations with the pool house. We placed it in the record initially, actually when the application was first filed. Mr. Giffra objected to this board, the ARB, and the building inspector, both in writing, both before and after the certificate of occupancy were issued. And Mr. Bennett knew about it. He had been acting as Mr. Giffra's counsel.
That's absolutely incorrect. That's a lie. That's false. Mr. Giffra called me and asked me to get involved, and I said, I do not, nor have never done opposition work. Okay. This is not the appropriate forum, and please direct Mr. Fife not to say so.
Sir, can I speak? Hi, my name is Robert Giffra, and I am the objectant here. I'm also a member of the New York Bar, and am quite experienced in matters like this. Let me give you some background here. Mr. Bennett was my counsel. He was the person who helped us with our application years ago. He helped us with our wetlands application. He helped us with our application before we even bought our house. He was involved in the construction of the house. Long relationship. Now, when the issue of the pool house came up, and I'm prepared to put a declaration into this body, okay? Mr. Flanagan was then representing Mr. Fox. And what happened was the pool house burned down in January, and all of a sudden I see it's being rebuilt. I looked at the village code, and I read the village code, and I'm a fairly experienced lawyer at reading. I was a Supreme Court law clerk. I run the litigation department at Sullivan and Cromwell. And I'm looking at this code, and it says if you reconstruct a property on wetlands, and if the property is in the historic district, you have to go through both the ARB and the ZBA. So I called Mr. Bennett, and I am prepared to swear to this under oath. And I said, John, can this be done? Can you just rebuild a property?
I'd like him put under oath.
Stop.
Can you?
John, let the man finish.
I can object. You're a litigator. I can object. Put him under oath.
Let him finish, please.
And why is this, you allowing this to happen in this forum?
I think that Mr. Bennett's comments are just very telling. But I'm telling you what happened. I called him up on the phone, and I said, John, my reading of the village code is that when it says you must, if you reconstruct the pool house or something on wetlands, you've got to go through the ZBA. And he said, you're absolutely right, that's correct. And then I said, well, don't you also have to go through the ARB? He said, absolutely right, you're correct. Now it's worse than that. There's a letter that I wrote, which is in the record, a very long, detailed letter. I provided that letter to Mr. Bennett, then acting as my lawyer in my view. And I said, John, what do you think? He said, excellent letter, I agree with it. And the letter was sent to this board, to the building inspector. Mr. Flanagan got a copy of it. So I objected, and in fact, if you look at the timing, the pool house C of O was issued, it's dated 5 days or 6 days before my letter comes in. Okay? The other issue, which is with respect to the guest house, which was supposed to be built in accordance with the exact to be the same and was switched around. That CVO was issued after that. Okay, so I objected in a timely basis to the pool house. And why does it matter to this group? That pool house has 2 bathrooms in it. Okay, we've heard how there's a terrible septic system in this property right now. Clearly, before you were going to rebuild the pool house, the applicant should have come to this board and said, hey, I want to rebuild my pool house, which burned down, and you'd want to know what the septic was, you'd want to ask a lot of questions, maybe this board would take...
When did this pool house burn down? Is this something recent?
No, this happened...
We're getting a brand new factor in here.
No, sir. The point is, okay, that there was the pool house is part of this property. Mr. Fox rebuilt the pool house, got a permit in 1 day without going through the ARB or the ZBA, as he should have under the village code.
This happened just recently, or years ago?
No, this happened about 3 or 4 years ago.
Okay.
Maybe 2 or 3 years ago. We have the documents in the materials before this group. But the simple fact of the matter is that he rebuilt the pool house illegally. Okay, did not go through this board, did not go through the ARB. Let me raise another issue which has been raised before, but I think it's an important one. There was discussion about this circle and what's in the circle or not in the circle, right here. Okay, and we've provided you all with pictures showing, Google Earth photo of, the installation of something in this piece in this circle, and that was done 2 years ago. We have the Google Earth photos. It's been submitted to this board. This area is within 150 feet of the wetlands. If you look at the Google Earth photo, there are big concrete things going into the ground, 3 of them. Then there are 2 boxes next to the concrete circles. I've asked experts about it. What is going on there? It's the installation of a septic system. Now, Mr. Bennett wrote a letter to this board saying that was piles of dirt, and he said he spoke to Mr. Ruperto, who was the contractor who did this. Now, I've since heard through that maybe they're saying now this is sort of, and we heard today that there's no rainwater tanks in this property. So something was installed in this property that's not shown on any survey. There are photos of things going into the ground, and it was done within 150 feet of the wetlands. So there's been a pattern in connection with this property of activity with respect to the wetlands, which is not going through the village code, the illegal installation of what appear to be, septic tanks in the ground, and then we've already gone through the issue of the patios, and that all needs to be, in our view, taken into account before this board can act. But with respect to the pool house, there's no question that I wrote a letter. Mr. Bennett agreed with the legal analysis in the letter. It was submitted to this board, and nothing was done about it. I think that pool house never should have been rebuilt without going through this board, and the rebuilding of that pool house without going through the ARB and the ZBA was illegal, and the pool house does not have a valid certificate of occupancy, and the argument that no one objected in a timely way is simply false. There's a letter in the record where I objected, and in fact I ran the letter by Mr. Bennett. Thank you.
If I may, under the New York sections of the New York State Village Law, which are in my letters, if you have a problem with the decision of an administrative official, in this case, presumably, Mr. Gifford's concern with a issuance of a building permit and then a pool house and then a certificate of occupancy for the reconstruction of this pool house, you have 60 days from the date of that decision not to write a letter to the building inspector, not to write a letter to anybody, but to file an application before this board for a request to overturn the building inspector. You've done that on many occasions. People have, there was a fairly, spirited application involving Mr. Foster's interpretation of the height sections of the law for my clients, Lifton and Green, and the Veronis objected to it. And what did their lawyer do? Properly filed an application before this board to overturn that determination of the building inspector, and you have 60 days to do that. That was not done. This assumes there was some illegality. This assumes that the permits were issued in some sort of outside of the ordinary course of business. Under the village law, you have the right to rebuild in kind that structure, period. And that was the determination that the building inspector
Is the
made.
pool house on the current CO?
So the pool house has a CO. This is yet another sideshow, yet another distraction, as is Mr. Giffra's claim somehow. And he knows, you know something, if Mr. Giffra has some problem with what I did and I didn't do anything wrong, he knows the forum. And it's not the Zoning Board of Appeals. I've told him, like I've told probably 500 people in the last 30 years, I don't represent, do any opposition work. I did represent Mr. Giffra in obtaining permits for his house, has nothing to do with it. Well, that's my point.
We're getting off the track.
Absolutely.
Pool house burned down,
Let
built
me
up.
just make one
Has
point.
nothing to do with this application.
No, it does, because here's under New York State law, if a C of O was issued illegally without getting the appropriate approvals from the relevant boards as provided for under this village code, it should be taken down. Number two, I objected in a timely way, and the letter is before this board. I filed, yes, it's in the record, and it was submitted to this board.
This board?
Yes, it was submitted to the zoning board.
When?
It's in back in the real time when the pool house was being rebuilt. I objected to it before the C of O was issued, and 5 days later, I objected and said no C of O should be issued, that it was done illegally and it hadn't gone through the
Seems to me
appropriate
that
boards.
should have been a matter for the courts, for Article 78,
An appeal.
The issue is I did
or an
not...
appeal of the building inspector's decision.
Under New York State law, if someone has done something illegally, particularly in the wetlands, it can be undone and should be undone when it was done
Somebody
illegally.
has to file an application before us to do that.
But we made an application
No application was ever made to us for that.
We never got it.
Well, I wrote a letter, which was a 7 or 8 page letter, which is before the board here. We'll get your copy
A
of it.
letter is not an application. We need a formal application.
Well, I believe that the letter I wrote constituted a formal application, and sort of, I would imagine that the village board your board would be concerned that someone is rebuilding a pool house without having the appropriate permits to do so, and without going through this board and doing what was done here. And there's been a whole pattern of this in connection with this
If they got
property.
a permit wrongfully, then an application must be filed with us to overturn the building inspector. And no such application was ever filed.
I certainly wrote to this board and never received a response.
Writing a letter is not the same as filing an application.
Who did you address it to exactly?
I directed it to the Zoning Board of Appeals, the Architectural Review Board.
Everybody on the board?
The entire board it was sent to, yes.
Never got it.
Well, it was a 7 or 8 page letter.
Never got it.
Well, it's in the record here and it was sent.
Well, was it sent to the building department? And
Yes,
they were supposed
yes.
to convey it to us?
No, it was sent to everyone. And it was directed to you, and the letter is in the record right now as we speak.
Excuse me. You don't file a letter, wait 3 years, you have to pay a fee, make an application to the board. If you were so concerned that the board wasn't acting on it, you don't wait 3-4 years and say, gee, what did you ever do with that letter that I thought was an application to you to overturn the building inspector? This is absurd. Why are you entertaining this?
Somebody erred here. There should have been a formal application filed before us.
Well, I ran the letter by
Overturn
Mr.
the
Bennett, but
building
that's a separate issue.
But we're getting off the track. This is not an issue before us.
Yeah, it is an issue before you to the following extent. This applicant wants a wetlands permit. He has illegally put up a pool house 50 feet from or 60 feet or 70 feet from the wetlands.
We
It's part of the
haven't proved
application.
that's illegal.
Well, he didn't go through this board and under the terms
I
of
don't know
the...
who he went through, but he's got it. It's on the CO.
He got it from the building inspector, but he should have gone through this board, and that's what the village code provides. It says if you reconstruct a structure on wetlands, you have to go through this board and get a wetlands permit. And you also have to go through the ARB if it was done...
But he didn't go through this board.
He went through neither. It was done illegally. And the point is, under New York state law, if someone gets a building permit illegally, that illegal building permit has no force and effect, and the certificate of occupancy has no force and effect.
The building inspector makes an error, or somebody in the building department makes an error, an application has to be filed with us to overturn that. And no such application was ever filed.
The letter I wrote did request that the C of O, any C of Os be rejected, be overturned. And
They weren't.
I sent a letter to this board. Well, it's in the
But I mean,
record.
they weren't overturned. The CO states that there's a pool house on the property.
Correct, it does. But the point is, there is a pattern in this property of not following the village code.
Trying to say this is part of the pattern.
Yes, and the pattern is...
That I understand.
The pattern is, we've shown you the pictures, okay, when Mr. Fox bought the property, this grass area was there. Now suddenly, without going through the ZBA, which is if you're going to concrete over in the wetlands, you need to go through the ZBA, didn't do that. He added additional patio space, didn't go through the ZBA. We've made the point about the drums that were put into the ground, and that's relevant to this application because he's obviously going to be doing work here. Our view is, looking at that it's a septic system. Someone needs to investigate and really find out what was put in there. Mr. Bennett wrote a letter to this body claiming that the Google Earth photos, which we presented to the board, were piles of dirt. They are not piles of dirt. My 10-year-old son would tell you they are 3 containers with 2 boxes next to them, and they constitute, in our view, we think, and we actually have them here. Let me put them. Okay, this is what I'm talking about. This is a Google Earth photo from May 23, 2015. You see it right there. Mm-hmm. Now, this is the subject property, and this is where this work that we've just been talking about was going on. Now, if you look, there are 3 round drums going into the ground. Do you see them right there? Next to the 3 round drums are 2 square boxes. Do you see those? Mm-hmm. Okay. Mr. Bennett wrote a letter to this board in connection with this application saying that this was just piles of dirt and that he had checked with the applicant's contractor, Mr. Ruperto. Now, presumably, Mr. Ruperto knew what he was doing here. He's claiming it's piles of dirt. We wrote a letter saying we think this was the illegal installation within the wetland setback of a septic system. If you look at the photo, there's absolutely no way that one could ignore the fact that these 3 containers plus the 2 boxes appear to be the illegal installation of a septic system. We've looked in Suffolk County. There's nothing no permit was ever filed, and no permit was ever filed with the village. So, I mean, I'll take this out of this document. I'll hand it up to
Bob. Keep it in there. Not septic systems.
Is that document part of the record?
Yes, it is.
I have to remind people what's in the record. We had Norsec go to the site and do an investigation of all of the septic systems on the property because we wanted to be able to demonstrate to you that the septic systems, although your grandfather, were below standard. That is in the file. These are not septic systems. What they are 2 drains for drainage outside of the 150-foot regulated area. Excuse me?
They appear to be further away than that grass.
They're outside of the 150 feet.
Right.
And they're drains trying to, and this is interesting, again, we get criticized for trying to control stormwater runoff. And we had needed no permits to install those whatsoever. And if you want to disbelieve Norsec, who's been around for 75 years, and I think you can take that company at their word, they went and did an investigation and have a report as to what the septic systems are. I will represent to you that those are drains trying to control the stormwater runoff. They're outside of the 150-foot regulated area, and there's no need for any permit for them.
No, in fact, Mr. Bennett wrote a letter to this board where he claimed that those were piles of dirt. Today, he's now claiming...
They were.
Now he's claiming that it was the installation of drains. He did not write that in the letter that was submitted to this board. That's something he's saying right now.
We're off the track again.
Just one...
Burn down pool house, rocks in the driveway, we're off the top.
Just in response, though, to Mr. Zahusky's question, the 150-foot setback line actually goes right through the middle of this area. It's certainly within
Drains or the septic?
where the alleged drains are septic it's within the 150-foot setback.
Big difference between a drain and a septic.
Right.
One is taking, stuff from the bathroom, and the other
Again,
one's
a
taking...
portion of it's even within the 125-foot
This is the 125, this is the 150, the drains are here, outside of the 150.
Mr. Chairman, that was what Mr. Bennett wrote to you was this was piles of dirt. He said nothing about drains. He said nothing about drains. And if you look closely at this, there are 2 boxes here, and we think it needs to be investigated as to exactly what was put in the ground.
Go look.
And who would you suggest would investigate this?
Presumably the building inspector or someone independent who would go and try to figure out what was being put into the
Ask the
ground.
building inspector to look at it.
We have asked the building inspector to look at it.
Ask him again. Is there anybody else who'd like to be heard? If we could keep to the topic. Mr. Grover, we will keep to the topic. I know you're very good at that.
Oh, boy.
Do you have some energy left to talk about science?
Not much, but a little bit.
Well, good evening. Bob Grover, Director of Environmental and Coastal Sciences at Greenman Peterson, Babylon. My second time here this summer after that long hiatus. Summer's going way too fast, by the way. I'm going to submit a brief report, so I'm not going to read it into the record. It's only a few pages, has no resemblance to any phone book. And I'm just going to make a couple of comments, and I'll be very brief because it is getting late. First of all, I want to address a few things that Mr. Bennett said earlier, and also some things that he included in his written submission to you after the June hearing. He quoted me in a couple of locations, and he quoted me grossly out of context. I want that on the record. I'm not going to get into the details of it because I know you're all intelligent enough to see right through the misquotes. I want to point out that the... have a copy of the letter, please. Yeah.
There's extra copies of it.
Yeah, this is mine. You can have mine.
There's another one here.
I want to... I get my own report. I want to make a point about the... Mr. Bennett talked about some... comparing this to some work that was done on Meadow Lane, and I think most of the dozens of times I've addressed this board, it has had to do with projects on Meadow Lane. So you know I'm very, very familiar with Meadow Lane, as all you are. And Meadow Lane is not Lake Agawam. And they're entirely different systems, entirely different problems, not more sensitive. Lake Agawam is significantly more sensitive than Meadow Lane. As far as the, well, I'm not going to belabor any more of the misquotes. I do want to stress, though, that again, nobody should be claiming any credit for installing an IA system. They're going to be mandatory before this application runs its course. So this isn't mitigation for anything. This is something that is on its way. There were some statements made, well, this is the first IA system that you've ever seen on Lake Agawam. We should get credit for that. Well, they were never approved before. Now they're approved, and they're going to be mandated, again, before this application is done, I would hope. I want to stress the critical importance that you really need to minimize both the effluent nitrogen levels, which we've talked about, and the total sanitary flow. And again, this brings us back to this continuing controversy. I believe, based on Mr. Bennett's own definition of walking and talking and quacking, et cetera, that there are probably 15 bedrooms by the village's definition and the county's definition in this proposed house. If the county health department doesn't do its job properly, and that's not uncommon, that's quite common, that's not a reason that you should follow suit. I think you have to take a harder look than the county does because you're a more local municipality. You got to zoom in on these applications, and you do. I know I don't have to belabor that point with you, but if the health department says, oh, gee, we're going to overlook these extra spaces, that's not a reason for you to do the same thing. Since the June hearing, I've had an opportunity to read the applicant's report prepared by Lombardo Associates. Kind of interesting. And I want to make just a few brief comments on that. The entire report, of course, is predicated on the addition of only one bedroom, with which I completely disagree, and so it's really flawed from the beginning. A couple of minor points on his report. In his calculations, he assumed an application rate of lawn fertilizer of 1 pound of nitrogen per 1,000 feet per year. That's not correct. I mean, that's way, way, way too low, especially for a professionally maintained lawn. The real number would probably be 3 or 4 pounds per 1,000 feet per year. I put down 2. A really well-maintained golf course will put down 2. That's a responsible turf management procedure, but 3 or 4 in an area where you have professionally maintained lawns by contractors who are competing with each other to have the greenest lawn because they get more clients that way. They're going to be using more nitrogen. And also, I want to talk just a little bit about, and I didn't want to get into this because it gets very confusing, and I certainly don't want to add any confusion to the discussion. But Mr. Lombardo correctly pointed out that the IA system is actually going to increase the amount of phosphorus entering the lake. And I'm going to get back to that in a minute. But keep in mind that the relative roles of nitrogen and phosphorus are still subject of pretty serious debate. There's a lot we don't know about the nutrients, the role of nutrients, in particular in harmful algae blooms. But it is clear that phosphorus does play a very important role. So now that laundry detergent's out of the bottle, so to speak, just a couple of notes about phosphorus. It is true that phosphorus is essentially banned in landscape fertilizers in Suffolk County. On this basis, Mr. Lombardo assumed zero contribution of phosphorus from landscape fertilizers. However, it's also true that that law is not applied to fertilizers marketed for landscape beds. If you take a random look, go to your local garden center, take a random look at the products in your nearby garden center, and you'll see that almost all of them contain significant phosphorus. For example, one very popular brand, which is the Miracle Grow Liquifeed, is 4% phosphorus. You have in the Southampton Press, you have a fabulous gardening columnist, Andrew Metzinger. And I correspond with him, and he was kind enough to share with me a spreadsheet that he made up of all the locally available fertilizer products. And on his spreadsheet, I believe there were 12 different formulations, and 11 of the 12 contained phosphorus in that same range as the Miracle Grow. So finally, in the same regard, Lombardo's observation about the innovative alternative systems actually increasing the phosphorus concentration in groundwater is one I've heard before. And it's something we need to take a look at. We're not going to solve this problem tonight, not even close, but the best science tells us that we really need to strive to reduce both nitrogen and phosphorus wherever possible. And there is a line of reasoning, just to put things into perspective, there is a line of reasoning that the soon-to-be proliferation of these IA systems is going to increase the phosphorus to nitrogen concentration in groundwater, which will actually cause more harmful algae blooms, cyanobacteria blooms in area fresh waters. It's not a fringe theory, it's out there, it's being debated. It was recently expressed at a conference I was at by the state DEC regional freshwater fisheries manager. So it has some legs. There's a lot of things we don't know. What we do know is we've got to try to decrease the flow of both nutrients, both the concentration and the effluent, which we've already talked about, but also the flow. And the flow is a direct relation to the bedrooms, and you can't imagine having all this extra space with various labels being changed and say, well, none of them are ever going to be bedrooms, because that's just not realistic. Last month I made some comments about wildlife. I'm not going to reiterate them. I'm going to stick by them. I'll just say that the impact to wildlife is going to be a direct correlation to the amount of activity at the house, the amount of people using the house. Bigger house, nicer house, more people, more activity, more harmful to wildlife. So just to reiterate my conclusions from June, you gentlemen have an opportunity here to really make a difference in the health of Lake Agawam. And this is where the buck stops. You can really set a great precedence for future applications and force them to comply with the village's comprehensive plan for the lake, which states that future density should be limited, which this project isn't doing. And so for all of these reasons, I really urge you to deny this application, and I would be happy, as always, to answer any questions you have. That's it. Thank you.
We're not going to close this tonight, right?
What was it for written submission?
We have 7 more cases to hear tonight. Unless somebody has something dramatically new to add, I'd like to, dramatically new to add. Well, you were good last month, you were very brief, so.
Thank you for having me once again. My name is Sean O'Neill, Executive Director of Peconic Baykeeper. I will be as brief as possible. I have the joy of going after Bob again and pretty much agreeing with everything he said, so that's good. Just one thing I want to make absolutely clear. Claiming a benefit from an IA system in this particular application while you're also increasing density, it's not necessarily going to decrease the amount of nitrogen loading or nutrient loading into into Lake Agawam with this project. So just because you're putting one of these systems in, and as Bob stated, as these systems are going to become the standard and not the exception, it doesn't mean you're actually having an environmental benefit on Lake Agawam. The last point, I heard a lot about consistency and about allowing these particular applications to happen, that getting variances, getting wetland special permits. That consistency has led to increased densities. We know these increased densities have harmed the lake. So at some point, a reverse of course is needed if we want to improve the water quality in the lake. It depends on what the goal is. If the goal is to allow business as usual, then allow business as usual. But if the goal is to improve the water quality of the lake, which of course Peconic Baykeeper we are strongly in favor of, then it has to stop somewhere. This is a perfect place. Thank you.
I say something briefly again, is that we are focusing on one homeowner for the situation at the lake, and I think there's enough blame to go all around, and I think some responsibility must lie with the village of Southampton. There's bathrooms down there that may not be draining. There's all kinds of things. There's no movement to urge people voluntarily to cut back on the contaminants. There's just no effort. The sewer thing died, and we're focusing on one guy. So.
I don't think we have any intention to close this tonight, do we?
No, I suggest to keep it open.
May I be heard?
We're going to keep it open. Well, John,
I'm sorry.
There's people who would like to
Of course, you didn't get to talk the last time, so I figured I had to come up and do it this time. I'm going to take my mask down. Don't worry, it's about me, not you guys. So, I'm Whitney Stevens, and sitting right over there. And if she's got the mic, don't worry.
Yeah, she's got the mic.
I want to introduce you to my dad. He's sitting right there as well. I'm speaking to voice my family's really strong opposition. Let's think about this. We're the immediate neighbor. We're that neighbor immediately to the west of 472. And the issue for us is we've lived in the same home on Lake Agawam for some odd, let's call it 53 years, unfortunately, as long as I've been around. And we love our cove. We like nothing better than to sit on the porch and really look out on Lake Agawam. And I know you all are thinking, I've heard all of this before. And that is true. You've heard a lot of discussion tonight. However, the magnitude of this proposal is very, very impactful to not only us, but our neighbors and also the lake. And I know you've said it time and time again, we've heard about the lake. However, a couple things. There are a lot of numbers that have been thrown out tonight, so many of them. But there are a couple things that are absolutely indisputable. The footprint of the proposed home is more than double the footprint of the original home. There is a real increase in wetlands coverage, which literally enables this new connector in the wing. The total number of proposed rooms, I'm not getting into what the purpose of those rooms is. I know better than to do that. But the total number of rooms goes from 10 rooms to 20 rooms, plus a 2-car garage. And maybe it's more than 20, but it goes to at least 20. That is an increase of density when you are the next door neighbor. With rooms comes noise, comes activity, and a lot of other things. Now, again, I'm not going to get into the bathroom argument, but still, we're talking about going from 12 bathrooms to 14 to, I'm sorry, we're talking about increasing to 12 bathrooms total, and then 14 including the pool house. That is a lot of bathrooms. You can talk about the number of bedrooms, but I'm sorry, 14 bathrooms is a lot of bathrooms. Finally, we really appreciate that the Foxes made the decision to withdraw their application for the height variance. That was just incredibly destructive to us, and so we're incredibly appreciative of that. Also, Mr. Fox has made excellent efforts with us to try to address the parking that is so far to the south, that literally is in our lawn as we look out towards, or not in our lawn, but close to it as we look out towards Lake Agawam. But the point of it is, in the end, no matter how many, there's the height, there's the parking on the south that maybe we can work with, but in the end, the scale of this project really worries us. And now let's think about it as a perspective of a neighbor. And we have a few neighbors around the room tonight, but let's think about what you hear as a neighbor. So with greater scale comes greater occupancy. You have more rooms, more people, more cars, more activity. And with that comes more noise, less privacy, and in terms of what we see, you also have an additional structure in our line of sight. And yes, it is a certain number of feet away and all of that, but in the end, when we are looking out towards Lake Agawam, instead of seeing one home, we are now seeing two, and they happen to be 30 feet apart. And that is literally what you see from the west looking east. There is no doubt the enjoyment of our home is going to be compromised. All this activity is going to fundamentally alter the nature of this little common driveway community that we love. There's no doubt about it. We share our driveway with the Jifras, with the Frists, and with the Foxes. After all, if you think about it, these homes really were formerly part of a greater whole, constructed by a member of the Betts family. We really are all interconnected. Our homes literally were in the early days. So as you think about this, if you think about also that second-story addition, it's at its highest point, it's 30 feet. And you guys are, I know you're tired now and you've had it with this, and I get that. But in the same time, from our standpoint, we're not talking about a couple hours tonight. We are actually talking about the rest of the time that we enjoy our home and the impact to our privacy, the impact to what we see every single day, and to what we hear, and to the nature of our common driveway. And then finally, and I know you've heard everything you want to hear about the lake, so I am not going to go deeply into the lake, but there is little doubt to us that this project is going to set an incredibly dangerous precedent going forward for the gross expansion of other homes along the lake. It's not about, when you all are sitting here thinking about this project, don't think about it in a vacuum. Every single project, Mr. Bennett, Mr. Fox, Mr. Fife, they've all done the same thing. They've talked to us about prior decisions that have been made by each one of you. And every single time a decision gets made, it sets a course for the future. And all I'm asking you all to do is to really take a step back and recognize the precedent that is being set here tonight. So that was sort of my thought with respect to the lake. And by the way, we love the lake and we care about the lake. And so it really is important to us, but I think we've talked about it enough. Now, the new septic system, I get it. And I don't know if it works or it doesn't work. But I got to tell you, I would think going forward, you all would maybe want to consider just making it a part of a project like this. If you're going to double your footprint, maybe you also should improve your septic at the same time. Seems to me a pretty big investment is being made here between the preservation, the modernization, and the footprint, that we could also be addressing the septic. And so I think that's about it. I'm on the bandwagon here. I also, and our family, respectfully request that you postpone any decision about this until the ARB has an opportunity to weigh in. I think that is absolutely essential. This is a historic home, and it really has an important place in the history of Southampton. And I don't want, again, I know that there's questions as to who's been objecting and whether or not they have a right to object or not, but in the end, there's been a lot of strenuous objection to this project. And I think it needs to be heard and needs to be understood and needs to be studied. So finally, right here, standing here today, we must respectfully request that you reject this application. Thank you, and that's it, I promise.
I think we're going to cut this off for tonight. I mean, it's not going to be closed tonight. It's going to be left open. So there's more chance to speak again next month if you wish. Is that okay with you? Is there anybody that really has to speak? That can't wait till next month?
If I may,
Well, John, you can wait.
this is the first time I've had a hearing open when this environmental consultant has no issues, has nothing been closed.
We're going to keep it open, John.
But I don't have anything additional to submit. Mr. Grover, I don't care about responding.
Other people do have something to say about it.
We'll let them speak.
We're trying to go on with the meeting tonight, John. I'm going to recommend that it stay open, so there's, we don't have to explain it. We're just going to keep it open. Okay? Kevin, may I make a point?
Yeah.
We've got to try and get a grip on this bedroom issue, and that can be done between now and the next meeting. Patrick, can you get a hold of CMAC and submit to the board in chart form, if you take notes on this? You have now the revised drawings of the house, so I would like you to identify what room or what space in the house, by an outline of that, what you're alleging are the bedrooms, and then the reason that you're saying that particular area is a bedroom. And get a copy of that to John's office and the board ASAP. Okay, thank you.
You're all aware of the fact that the building inspector has made a determination.
Yes, we are.
Yes, we are. Bedrooms.
Yep.
We know.
And absent any properly, procedurally made attack on that, that is the law of the
Well,
case.
that's what Bo just asked for, I believe.
Yes.
All right, so unless there's someone who really has to speak right now and can't wait till next month, I'm going to make a motion that we hold this application open for all purposes.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye. I'm the
Okay.